to everybody. Good morning. I'm very happy to welcome all our participants for the traditional Sunday morning session of the school. This Sunday morning session is a special event, not a lecture, but a meeting and discussion with one of the prominent intellectuals or simply interesting individuals which can contribute to the content of our school. And we have this Sunday event for all 10 years during which the school exists. And for half of this period, I think, Dr. Fedor Lukyanov, Mr. Fedor Lukyanov, joined us and gave us a special privilege to share with us his ideas about the most important international developments, Russian national and Russian foreign policy developments. And we had a pleasure to talk to him. Mr. Lukyanov is currently the most prominent Russian foreign policy analyst and journalist, a very good and old friend of us. For a couple of years already, Mr. Lukyanov is #1 in the top list of the Russian national foreign policy thinkers. This top list is based on the annual survey conducted by among the Russian foreign policy analysts, journalists, and foreign policy community within the Russian government. So probably now Mr. Lukyanov is the individual #1 among the Russian foreign policy speakers. I think it will be enough to introduce him like that. Besides all, he is a chief editor of Russia and Global Affairs, the leading Russian foreign policy magazine, which exists for already 18 years, excuse me, and enjoys a prominence among the Russian and international foreign policy community. So I'm very happy to welcome Mr. Lukyanov to join us this morning or this afternoon or this evening, depending on your time zone. And we have about 1 hour to listen to him and to have a discussion with him, to share with him our thoughts and ideas. Fedor, please.
Thank you very much. After being introduced as #1 foreign policy commentator, so now I'm totally confused because being #1 means that you need to say something which will be, which will close the issue, so to say, to complete the whole discussion, and that's it. Of course, thank you very much for this kind of introduction, but of course, all of us understand that all those ratings are just a game, so certainly we should not take them too much serious. But what is really great nowadays is not to be #1 or #10 or #45 in any rating of international analysts, but to be part of this community at all. Because what I used to say to our students at the Higher School of Economics at the first session, I have a big class called Information Factor in International Relations, and I used to start my introductory lecture with the statement how lucky all of us are to have this profession just now. Because, of course, what we are witnessing these days in the world is not unique. I mean, mankind went through different periods and events much harder and much more frightening than now, but being specialists in international relations, all of us have now privilege to witness in person trends and processes which several generations before us could only learn based on textbooks, books, and theory. But now what we are witnessing, it's a profound change of international system, and we watch it online. We watch it every day in our practical life, in our professional life, watching television, following websites, meeting our counterparts like this meeting. And this is a really unique opportunity. I think if all of us will survive, and I hope so, then we will have absolutely unprecedented experience, which we should analyze, interpret, and then turn into those books, textbooks, which those after us will learn at schools and the universities. Hopefully this period will not be forever, this period of transformation. And our followers will not need to say the same as I do, but who knows. Of course, this school and this discussion is rather strange, because all those 10 years which we had this school before, it was more or less same format with discussions primarily with our Chinese colleagues, but gradually it turned into more international. This year changed not the narrative, but the practical ability to speak. And this online world has many advantages. It has several disadvantages as well, of course. On the one hand, it's a pity that we cannot speak directly to our participants. At the same time, looking at the list of participants, I understand that in case of normal offline school, probably the representativity of our group would be slightly different, not that impressive as this time. So maybe I start with the topic of this discussion is China as a superpower, and I will come to that as well. But to address this issue, first of all, probably we need to briefly outline in which environment we live nowadays, because this is actually what to a large extent will determine the existence and practices of great and superpowers in years or maybe even decades to come. Pandemic, which started in China but then overwhelmed the whole world, became very significant or did mean a very significant change in our life. But if we look at the international system, at international environment, actually we cannot say that pandemic changed everything upside down and was the event which launched some kind of a new development. It's not the case. The case is that many trends, mostly destructive ones, if we look at the previous international model, they started much earlier than first reports about COVID-19 started to came in December last year, January this year. And before this happened, many analysts, including those around Higher School of Economics and Valdai Club, where both Professor Bordachev and myself are working, we not predicted, but emphasized many changes, disruptive changes in the international system. And the notion of a crumbling world, which we introduced year 2018, and which at that time was received with a lot of skepticism among many colleagues who believed that we were too alarmist and, so to say, too nervous. But in fact, what we witnessed this year was that the whole world crumbled just like this, like during 2 weeks approximately. The whole situation changed. Again, it did not produce any completely new developments, but the pandemic and the virus served as a very powerful catalyst for all those trends we already witnessed before. So many people said so much about impact of the pandemic on international life between spring and now. So I will not go into details and repeat all this. I would love to emphasize two most important changes which from my point of view happened because of pandemic. Number one is quite widely discussed. This is the end of total, unlimited, comprehensive and overwhelming mobility, which was the main characteristics of the world in 21st century. It started to develop as a product of an advanced stage of globalization, approximately in 2000s. And the last 15 years were the period of triumph of this kind of total mobility, mobility of everything, of people, of money, of ideas, of information, of goods, you name it. And on the one hand, it was absolutely normal because that was a logical continuation and extension of the globalized environment, which started to emerge even before the collapse of communism and Soviet Union in 1980s, when a new wave of leaders came in the West, like British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher or US President Ronald Reagan, who were really inspired by those new liberal economic ideas. At that time, they could not expect that those ideas suddenly would become guidelines for the whole world, but it happened when Soviet Union and the communist bloc in Europe collapsed overnight almost. And then this idea about neoliberal globalization was accepted basically by the whole world as something which is a normal logical development of international system. This famous metaphor of the end of history coined by Francis Fukuyama exactly at the moment when communism started to collapse in Europe, turned into a brand for the new era. And until now, we can see some remnants of this in the political thinking of some Western leaders, much less than before, but still, it was a very strong idea, or rather very strong illusion, in which everybody in the West, or almost everybody in the West, wanted to believe. Anyway, what we achieved in 21st century, this absolutely free, open world without limits and borders, that was perceived as something logical, natural, and which is, from my point of view, the most important, unavoidable and irreversible. And that was this change of this perception was another second very important change due to what happened 2020. This feeling of irreversibility has waned and basically disappeared. Again, globalization initially was not perceived as something entirely positive for everybody. There were people not very influential at that time, but still on the right wing and the left wing, who criticized global development and emphasized all those negative and risky and dangerous aspects of that. But that was rather marginal part of this, the international discussion. The overwhelming part of commentators and de facto all those who took decisions, they assumed that this development would continue without any limit and destination. So the destination was at the horizon. So we moved to the horizon, but horizon has, you can never reach it, but you can always just move towards this direction. What happened? Yeah, and again, those who were not satisfied or not fully satisfied with the global system, be it inside the Western world or outside the Western world, they maybe tried to revise a little bit, to adapt to that, but basically they had no idea, and there were no idea that this general trend can be changed at all. It could be adapted, but not changed. So what happened this year demonstrated that nothing is irreversible. Suddenly, the whole world just closed down. Something which could not be imagined, say, 2 years ago. What happened this spring was something completely unbelievable to those who really got used to the idea that all this development was irreversible. And of course, I don't mean that the whole international system as it emerged before pandemic has gone forever and will never recover. Certainly, the global general connectivity will remain. It's hardly possible to imagine that level of fragmentation, that different parts of the world will just exist by their own in autarkic development. It's maybe possible, but very unlikely still now. In terms of communication, yes, we see different attempts at different parts of the world, not just in Russia, China, or Iran, but including in the United States, in Europe. We see attempts to start to control information flows, but still now the communication environment is absolutely overwhelming. It's not fragmented yet, at least. We will see what will happen, but it's very difficult to reverse this universality. But yeah, and of course the disease, this virus, will sooner or later go. So no one knows when, but one beautiful day, to 21 or 22 or 24, I don't know. But this particular disease will be taken under control and will not cause consequences we witness now. So it will be, before we will get something new, it will be a technical possibility to come back to the system as it did exist before January or February 2020. But it does not mean that everything will be back. Just because of this sudden understanding that that development was, yes, natural, yes, logical, but not irreversible. And lockdown, this closing down of the world, happened almost simultaneously everywhere. That was a synchronous development from Australia to Greenland and from South Africa to Norway. And that, by the way, that demonstrated the power of globalization, because this is a disease of a really globalized world, when no a remote corner of the globe can feel safe, because this virus will come anyway. It's a very strong illustration of how interconnected we got due to global development. But now it's not the universal decision to be made anymore when and how particular countries, particular regions, particular groupings will open up again. And this is, from my point of view, the most important change compared to what we had before pandemic. This feeling of whatever you do, you at the end of the day arrive to the same pattern as it was before. I repeat it, even for those who were not happy about globalization, they did not see any way out. But now there is not a way out, but there is a practical opportunity not to get back immediately when it technically will be possible. To wait and see, to try to rebuild economic system, being more isolated and separated from global trends than it used to be previously. And of course, to try to formulate a particular unique model of development for countries which, for different reasons, were not happy with the global development. Paradoxically, the most unhappiness about the globalization came not from the non-Western world, which did not belong to those who basically did build up this world in late 20th and early 21st century. The real discontent came from Western societies, in particular in the United States, but also in Europe. And now you see, in the case of the United States, people, those who were so much frightened about Donald Trump, now they feel much more, feel a lot of relief that things will go back to normal. But at the same time, intellectually and instinctively, many people understand that there is no back to normal, because there is no normal anymore like it was perceived before this year. And it doesn't matter so much who will be in charge in the United States or in Germany or in France or in many other important Western countries. This is a new period, the period when those societies ask questions about the necessity to be that much globalized as it was perceived as a normal before this year. And that will have a lot of consequences, in particular, the level of universalist approach, which was again seen as something absolutely natural until recently. Now it will be fragmented much more, and in the Western world you see it more vivid than in Russia or in China, because the West achieved so much in this universalist globalization that now you see very clearly how this level starts to erode. Even inside the European Union, which was the most integrated and consolidated international grouping, but also at many on many fields. So I guess that this will have profound consequences for the international development in years to come. And again, it doesn't matter who will run which countries. Of course, personalities are very important, especially in today's world, when we don't have a lot of universal rules anymore, and decision making by particular persons plays more important role than before. But still here, the logic of global development will force those leaders to take particular decisions rather than vice versa. It will not be like actions by Putin, Xi Jinping, Erdogan, or Biden will define what will happen in the world. It's very powerful trend which will define a lot. Both Russia and China are entering this extremely interesting but pretty uncertain and turbulent period at a very important point in the histories of both countries. In different way, but both Russia and China are entering a period when the previous agenda has been exhausted or completed, we can say in this way. China arrived to the level of a superpower. As I know, for Chinese friends, it's not very comfortable to see themselves as a superpower, because traditional Chinese diplomacy since 1990s or 1980s, 80s even, was not to demonstrate too many ambitions and to pay more attention to domestic development rather than demonstrate international engagement. That was much more comfortable format, of course, but now China cannot afford that, simply for one reason, at least one reason, that no one will allow China to stay to stay in the shadow. So whether Chinese want or not, but they are perceived now as those who aspire global hegemony and global leadership. And again, even if it's not the case, but if all the rest see you in this way, you have not so much choice. And I think that it will mean a lot of transformations for Chinese policy, both economic due to global changes and political due to this new status. As for Russia, we are at a different point, but not less decisive either. Russian diplomacy and Russian political strategy, Russian international strategy from early 90s when Soviet Union collapsed till quite recently, maybe 2015, 2016, was basically very linear. It was very different in details. Of course, if you compare Russia to Russia 95, Russia 2005, and Russia 2015, you can see three different countries. But still, despite all differences and differences between the presidents, for example, Yeltsin, Putin, Medvedev, Putin 1, Putin 2, Putin, and so on. But despite all this, the main agenda was basically the same. To prove for the whole world and for ourselves that collapse of the Soviet Union was not the end of Russia as a significant international player and a great power. Different presidents saw different means how to achieve that, but at the end of the day, this task was completed. So what happened 2015 in Syria was a clear manifestation that Russia is back to the international stage as one of the leading players. And even those who hated Russian policy, they couldn't but accept this, acknowledge this. And here we arrive to the next stage, what to do with this status and how to develop the country, which of course, which recovered from the collapse of 1991. But now it's not about recovery anymore. It's about development in a completely new international conditions, and also in a completely new situation regarding economic priorities, technologies, social development, and so on. And here, I think Russia is not unique while facing acute challenges on which no one knows clear answers everywhere, be it United States, China, New Zealand, Indonesia, or Russia. All governments are really puzzled how to continue to govern in the situation of such a confusing international environment and inability on the one hand to isolate themselves from, countries from the international environment, at the same time, inability to continue to be just an integral part of international system. It's a huge challenge. I think the challenge to a certain extent bigger than Russian Federation faced almost 30 years ago when Soviet Union collapsed. That was an awful, terrible period, but at least it was more or less clear what kind of policies, or rather not policies, but towards which destination we had to try to go. Now that's the question about destination. What kind of Russia should be built up in order to be in accord to all those changes, which also are not completed either yet internationally. And of course, we also have another trend, another aspect of this transformation here in this country. The political system is in a transition, despite political constitutional amendments adopted recently by the referendum, but still no clear answers given how Russian political system will look like 2 years from now, not to talk about 5 or 7 years from now. And this is a very big issue. I think to a certain extent we share this problem with Chinese, but in a very different way than China. So to conclude my initial introduction, I would be back to the beginning. I think we have a fantastic opportunity, a fantastic chance to, first of all, to understand how the international system really works, to understand on practical exercise. But also, it sounds a bit maybe American, but we have chance to take part in the change and to influence this change, which is a huge responsibility, but that's extremely exciting. And I hope that we will be able to change the world to the better, especially as it is certainly needed, looking at what happens around us. Thank you very much, and I'm ready to respond to any questions or any criticism, comments, so on.
Yeah, thank you very much, Fedor. As a moderator, I should abuse my responsibility, so I take the opportunity to ask a question myself first before we go to our other participants. Yes, you made an absolutely comprehensive description of the current world affairs and the role of the rising great power like China within the international system. But perhaps because of your concentration of your speech and the topic, you didn't say too much about Russian foreign policy. However, I think that many of our participants would like to learn something about foreign policy of this country, which is also changing and which is also adapting to the current international changes and circumstances. Russia is known as an active foreign policy player. Russia is using military force as an instrument of foreign policy. Many people and many commentators believe that Russia is one of the pragmatic players, if not everybody is now pragmatic. However, at certain cases, like, for example, in the South Caucasus, we can see indicators that Russia is prepared to act not only on the pragmatic, but also on the moral grounds without having direct strategic or security interest in a certain international situation, but still intervening actively just because of some moral considerations can be seen. So what do you think about the nature of Russian foreign policy now and the combination of realism and morality within?
Okay, Timofey, I don't dare to speak about moral in foreign policy in front of you, because there is no bigger specialist than this. So I guess, first of all, what I learned from you, there is no, first of all, no contradiction between pragmatism and morality in the foreign policy if it is well organized. And secondly, I think that, in fact, Russian perception of pragmatism has always been felt or marked, at least, by Russian tradition of how to see international relations through the lens of certain values which are connected to morality. It's not how Russian policy has been perceived, in particular in the West, since collapse of the Soviet Union. But Western view has unfortunately always been very much stereotypic and biased, I would say. I think that pragmatism in our case, as it was manifested recently during the conflict in the South Caucasus, cannot be separated from values, because the interconnection between, say, Armenia, Azerbaijan in this case, or more general, the former Soviet Union and Russia in broader terms, this interconnection is based on certain joint development since centuries, which was not based on imperial expansion only. It was based on certain kind of extension of values which could be different. For example, in the period of Russian Empire or in the period of Soviet Union, of course, you can find a lot of differences, but that has never been a purely mercantilist policy, which we recently saw in a very clear glance in case of the United States and the President Trump, who is sincere, very sincere in his statements. He is a pure mercantilist. that was on the one hand welcomed in Russia for this sincerity, but it's not how Russia traditionally sees its role in international relations and in settlement of conflicts. Of course, as everywhere, Russian values can be challenged, and not everybody see them in the same light as we do. But yeah, I believe that Russian specificity is just that. We cannot separate between pragmatism and values. Sometimes it's very good, sometimes it's terrible, but that's how we are, how we do.
Thank you, Fyodor. The next question is from Eka Horbaladze.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Professor Lukyanov, for sharing your opinions, and Professor Bordachev for giving me opportunity to ask a question. I guess it is a general one. I think for a decade, maybe a bit more, one of the most discussed issues is emerging multipolar world order. When I look at the logo of the summer school, I mean, DICE, I have some mental associations that there is someone in the world who throws this dice, but what scenarios appear never knows in advance. About 30 years, this someone had been the US. From my point of view, sorry for value judgment, in some extent, this hegemon more or less had a conception or idea what should the world look like. Nowadays, as we see, and you paid attention to this point in your speech, the world changes and situation mostly exacerbates more and more. So my question is, if once we witness the multipolar world order, could it be stable enough, assuming that the actors of a hypothetical multipolar world will have to play up the dice much more frequently and maybe without certain notions where could it lead the world? All the more so as COVID-19 pandemic once again perfectly illustrated the national interest is dimension of paramount importance, which mostly appear to be overlapping. Will it going to be some kind of Jumanji game, however, maybe interesting one, as you mentioned, but nevertheless, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a question for another lecture, maybe. I try to make an essence. We are in the multipolar world already. Here you are, you live there. I think this long period, starting from mid-90s, when the concept of the multipolarity was initially coined in Russian discourse by then time Foreign Minister Evgeny Primakov. And till now, or till recently, that was a concept which, first of all, was designed to counter US hegemony, to counter the pretty unique period in the international relations when one particular country tried to completely dominate international system, and that was not perceived very well by everybody. And that was, so to say, a slogan to confront the aggressive unipolarity by the United States. Now I have a different situation. This unipolarity basically failed. And we have this multipolar world. And as President Putin expressed it several years ago, the multipolar world per se is not a solution. It's just a new environment. It's not a solution to all those multiple problems our civilization is facing. So it's a question whether we at all can talk about multipolar order, whether it will be an order based on multipolarity. It's a big discussion, of course, and maybe I'm totally wrong, but what we wrote in our Valdai reports, co-authored by Timofey, myself, and several other colleagues, it's a rather movement towards an anarchic system, anarchic in theoretical sense, where the order as we got used to see it based on our experience in particular in second half of 20th century will not be possible, while interaction between countries, especially big countries, important countries, will be much more chaotic and based on their mutual assessment, how they see each other and how they see limits for their own power. That is that's not an order, but it might be, in case everybody behaves more or less rationally, it might be a system which will be self-organizing. Of course, it sounds a little bit utopian looking to today's behavior, but who knows? And as for practical means to address this new environment, I think what we see between Russia and Turkey, first in Syria, now in Southern Caucasus, that's a prototype for a new way to settle a relationship between great powers, based on just a rational understanding what is possible, what is not possible, what is needed, what is not needed. I don't mean that's an ideal model, of course, and we will see how it will work in the future between Russia and Turkey. Certainly, we will face a lot of interesting situations. But this is at least the way which worked in Syria, and now it works in Nagorno-Karabakh. Look at international conflicts. Do you see a lot of successful examples of how they are being settled by the United States, by the European Union? I don't see. So maybe this ad hoc relationship based on pragmatism, actually, and understanding of limits, that will work better. But this is exactly what I tried to say, that we have an extremely interesting and exciting period ahead of us. We will see whether it works.
Thank you very much. Next question is Rodion Kudakaev.
Thank you very much for sharing your opinion. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. My question is about Chinese and Russian cooperation in a specific region, in the Arctic region. So this region has become more important than it was 2 decades ago. And I want to ask what kind of role China can play in Arctic? Will it be just humble customer of Russian energy sources, or it will be a more active player? And can be the Russian Northern Sea route be a part of Chinese Belt and Road Initiative?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, I don't believe that description humble customer is applicable to China anywhere. It's not about that. China will not be a humble customer anymore, be it with Russia, with China, with the United States, or whatever. Whether Arctic and Northern Sea route can become part of Chinese roads, belts and roads, certainly not, because Russia is positive about Belt and Road Initiative, but Russia is not part of that, and Russia has its own strategy, which can be very much compatible with Belt and Road, but it's not the same. So in the future, in case of positive development, I can imagine some kind of harmonization of opportunities, but certainly it will not be one project which suits for all. As for Chinese presence in Arctic, I don't think it is a big secret that Russian position is ambivalent. On the one hand, as part of very advanced and positive cooperation with China, Russia is interested to see Chinese involvement in all important areas and fields. At the same time, China is extremely ambitious, and China would love to play such a significant role in Arctic, which until recently was a privilege of those powers who are Arctic powers, these members of Arctic Council. And the common position of the Arctic Council, despite big differences on many issues between, for example, Russia and US, Russia and Canada, and so on. But the unified position is that those who are Arctic powers, they have special rights there, they have privileges there. And they decide to what extent they allow outside powers, even that important and that big as China, to come there and to work there. So I think it's it will be one of issues where Chinese and Russian cooperation has enormous potential, but it should be very carefully calculated and developed step by step. At the end of the day, I'm sure that China will play a very big role in Arctic, but conditions and regulations and sharing of benefits, that will be a very big discussion. And a result of this discussion will not be just intellectual decision, but that will be a result of a very active practical cooperation, which has already started.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Next question from our Chinese participant, Yu Tsi.
Hi, thank you for the host, and thank you for Mr. Lukyanov for the report. My question also concerns about Chinese investment and its influence in specifically Central Asia. And I read an article from Russia in Global Affairs. It's called The Sinophobia in the Post-Soviet Space, written by, I think, Yuri Kulintsev. And I think it objectively showed a lot of challenges Chinese companies are facing in Central Asia, for example, in Kyrgyzstan. While we know that many Western media is doing propaganda against the Chinese companies in terms of environmental, human rights issues. But on the other hand, some of the problems reported by this article, I think are pretty sincere and genuine. Like, for example, Chinese company didn't hire enough local people so that to promote job opportunities over there. And also the regulation on environmental issues, because our project group is doing sustainable development goals. So that's why I basically asked the question. Yeah, what would you think some viable ways for Chinese companies in doing business in Russia, in Central Asia, and basically in Eurasia region? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this excellent question. And thank you that you read our journal and the article. Yes, I think that was a very good article. It was co-authored by 4 contributors, including 2 of them from Central Asia. And first of all, you know, statement number 1, Russia is very positive about Chinese presence in Central Asia. This is very much contrary to what Western analysts and journalists used to write. They predict inevitable clash between Russia and China and Central Asia. Sorry to say, this is a bullshit, because it's absolutely no reasons to expect why Russia and China should collide for economic influence in Central Asia. First, it's important to have any economic development there, just to maintain stability. And secondly, Russia is Russian leaders and Russian analysts are very much aware that Russian capacity to economically contribute to Central Asia is much smaller than Chinese. So why it's no competition? Statement number 2, of course, you should expect, Chinese should expect, growing resistance, not from Russia and not so much even from the governments maybe, but from local people, because China is big, China is rich, China comes to particular countries with its own perception how to work and how to earn money on this. And inevitably, be it Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, Africa, wherever, that will be rising suspiciousness, which is skillfully used by all those who are trying to create as much trouble for China as possible. And you know, there are numerous actors who would like to do it. So I think that Chinese economic expansion in Eurasia is inevitable and even welcome. But at the same time, Chinese investors on the state level or on the private level should be aware that it will produce a lot of suspiciousness about people, and those feelings should be addressed, first of all, in terms of environment, and secondly, yes, as you rightly pointed out, the feeling that Chinese just earn money and they don't create enough wealth for local communities. And secondly, of course, other countries, they have their own interests, partially coinciding with Chinese, partially contradicting Chinese. And this is, as the previous question about Arctic, this is work in progress. You cannot just come and say, and impose some rules and say, we work in this way, that's it, full stop. It will not work. So especially in Russia. Russia is a big country with a very deep-rooted tradition of conservatism, or so what, traditionalism, and we don't buy anybody's traditions like this. But as a process, I think as a interaction which produces new forms of collaboration, that will work. It should work. Otherwise, I don't see any other ways how to develop Eurasia.
Thank you very much,
Thanks
Fedor. Thank you, Fedor. The next is Vladimir Sherbunov.
Yes, thank you, Professor Lukyanov, for your report. My question concerns Europe, namely the autonomy of Europe, whether it will become more autonomous in the future, and especially in the wake of this competition between China and US, the US, in which Europe is not that interested in being like an active ally of the United States. So, thank you.
You know, on the website, there's a website, Politico, European edition of Politico. There's a very good article today, which is called European Think Tanker in Chief, dedicated to President Macron. And I think it's a very good article because they place Macron exactly where he should be placed. They notice what many people noticed before, but it was not pronounced yet, that Macron is not a leader. In fact, he's a very sophisticated and smart commentator. He discusses questions, including what you ask about European autonomy. He makes very sharp statements and very interesting observations, but nothing follows. Like a think tanker. Think tanker puts a question and then please politicians do it. But as long as you're a think tanker is fine. When you're a leader of a big country, that's less fine. Frankly, I remember another president who was exactly like this in our country, whose name was Dmitry Medvedev, and who was a brilliant person to write excellent articles about problems, but nothing happened afterwards. Why I remember this? Because I don't see in Europe, and Macron, having said that, Macron is the only person who at least asks questions, because if you look at the rest, they don't do it. He asks questions without turning them into acts, but he at least he asks. the rest is silent, or they just busy with adaptation, with survival, and so on. So I don't see where European strategic autonomy can come from. Now, I had a discussion a couple of days ago, a big discussion, Russian-German forum, and Russian participants were absolutely shocked after 5th or 6th German speakers in line. All of them started with the statement, now we have Biden administration, thanks God, Biden is replacing this awful Donald Trump, and now everything will be different, now everything. So they really put all their hopes on change in Washington. I guess they will be disappointed, but even if not, but it means that which strategic autonomy we can talk about. It's not part of the thinking yet, at least. I'm not sure that it will be part of the thinking in the future, because Europe doesn't create any preconditions for that now. As for China, yes, indeed, for Europe, Europe doesn't see any direct threat or menace from China, despite the fact that many Atlanticists in European expert community, they try to impose this idea on Europe, but objectively there is no. So they will try to avoid being involved in the US crusade against China in case it will happen. That's why they are so happy about Biden, because Biden seems to be less aggressive against China. Again, it's an illusion, but still. So my prediction for next period, a couple of years to come, Europe will try to be as inactive as possible in this struggle. But at the end of the day, if United States will really push them, really put demands on them, they will reluctantly join this anti-Chinese campaign.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Fyodor. We have exhausted our time, only 1 hour. And I think that during your lecture and discussion, we have touched upon many important issues which will be of great use for the further discussions during the school and for the project work. You remember perhaps that traditionally by the end of this lecture, we provide the lecturer with a present from the summer school. And of course, we will send you the picture of this present. and you will receive it when the quarantine and travel restriction measures are going to be lifted. So, Fyodor, thank you very much, and please enjoy your day. And I wish to the rest of us the good working continuation of this school. Thank you.